We are live. It says we are live, therefore we are live. I will not contest it, YouTube. We are live. Hey everyone, this is Thibert coming to you live from Hack Shack Studios, my little studio here in California, where I make my comic books. And if you don't know, I am a 35-year comic book veteran of this industry. I've worked on Spider-Man, X-Men, Superman, Batman, oh, you name it, I probably have done it. Hey Mark C, how are you? It's just you and me, baby. It's just you and me, Mark. Yeah, so far so good. Yeah, I'll talk until we get a couple more people. I'll just BS, waste some time. Oh, there's Dark Admiral March Hare. Hi all. Hey, if you guys, there's one thing I do. I think faster than I talk, so I actually read quicker than I speak as well. So sometimes I get those things all confuzzled. So that's why. So anyway, what I was thinking, since it's a very hot topic right now, and before I say the title and everything, go into it. If you guys could tweet out or let people know that this is going, and that we're going to talk about the death of comic books live. There it is. I just said the title. That would be great. Hit the bell for notifications. If there's anyone you know that likes this kind of content, please tell them about it. That would be awesome, because I'm trying to build this channel. I actually have 1,700 subscribers. Yes, John Malin helped me last night, so that was very, very cool. So it's a hard-fought battle, you guys. The algorithms and stuff, it's so nuts. Like I get 5, I lose 2. I get 3, I lose 4. It's really hard to build momentum. So any kind of help from you guys, I greatly appreciate it. So onto the topic. I was thinking there's a lot of internet talk about comic books, where they're going to be, are they going to survive, the death of comic books, that type of thing. And so I just kind of wanted to put my 2 cents in there and talk about it and possibly see what people in the chat think too. So please, Mark, please, Dark, anybody else listening, come in the, oh, thank you, Mark, come into the chat, help out, and we can, air some of the frustrations with comic books. I'm not, and this is very optimistic of me, more so than any kind of fact, but I don't like this kind of talk, and it bums me out. I have 35 years invested in this industry. I read comics when I was very, very young, and to be honest, at a certain point in my life, for probably about 10, 15 years, it's all I did. It's all I absorbed. It's my life. It was my life until rock and roll and girls came into it, and cars. It was pretty much there from probably about 5 years old to, 14, 15. So middle school time, started getting out of comic books and started, getting into cars, music, and the ladies. Yeah. So I guess that's what you're supposed to do. So I guess I'm the textbook of what a young male in the U.S. growing up in the 70s did. So anyway, I was thinking that maybe I would start with the history of where things went bad, and maybe try to follow the trajectory of how we got to this point in time. And a lot of this happened on my watch, just slightly before I broke into the business, and then on my watch. And so in the beginning, that's my old person voice, the history of how we got here. So I got a favorite classic car. Oh yeah, I had a Pinto in the day, but that was just kind of like my first, kind of gateway car. And then I got a Ford Maverick, and I souped the hell out of it up, and and made that into as cool as a Ford Maverick could get. My Ford Maverick was. So, yeah. So the terrorists won after 9/11. Yeah, they won everything. Life pretty much changed. So the history is that when I was young and reading comic books, you could get them at a lot of mainstream outlets. So I even, when I was young, predate 7-Eleven. And 7-Eleven carried a lot of comic books later. But when I was a kid, supermarkets, five and dimes, they call them five and dimes. They were like Thrifties and Grant stores and Save-On drugs and stuff like that, carried comic books, and liquor stores of all things. Maybe guilty dads that were drinking a little bit too much and wanted to bring something home to their kids would pick up some comic books. So that was pretty much my outlet. So a lot of even supermarkets, like smaller chain, like not the big chain supermarkets, but the smaller mom and pop, when they had those when I was a kid, would carry comic books as well. So I always had access to them. I do remember one of the comic places that I would buy was a liquor store that was within bike distance from my house. And I would go there all the time and I would buy comics. And then I found out this was probably the late 60s, mid 60s, that they didn't carry Marvel comics. They only carried DC, Harvey Toons, what else? Atlas, I think. Like a lot of the comic books, but they didn't carry Marvel comic books in the 60s. And so I realized that if they had, I would have all of those first run Marvel comic books. I have a lot of them since, but I would have had them first run. So most of the books I have from Marvel first run were in the early 70s, and that's about the time when they were trying newer stuff like Doctor Strange, Ghost Rider. What was the one? The Hell Kid. He was like this. God, what was his name? He was like a demon, and like all like the horror comics, Ghost Rider. I can't think of some of the other ones, and all like the Morbius, Living Vampire. All those books started coming out at that time. So I got all those books first run. What was it, like Iron Fist, things like that, and so that's just a sad little side note that I could have had, Spider-Man, all those early Spider-Mans, Fantastic Four, all of those early Marvel books. But sadly, the place I bought my books did not carry them. So what I'm trying to say is they were fairly accessible to kids and to your parents. So they didn't really have the specialty stores. They didn't have, like, even when I went to New York City the first time in, oh my gosh, early 80s, they had, like, on the newsstand, they had, they have, like, street vendors. They had comic books there, like, low so little kids could see them. And so they were fairly accessible. And what happened later is the comics company decided, well, actually, let me back up. Specialty stores, like comic book shops, started, kind of popping up. And as a kid, I loved them. There was one. It wasn't really a comic shop. It was really a strange place. It was a leather shop, and it was like run by a Hispanic family, really nice. And they had an older kid, and I think it was his comic book collection. So there was a room in the back that was just filled with comic books, and they weren't in any particular order. They were all, none of them were first run, first run books. They were all back, like older books. And so, I used to ride my bike and go there with a friend, and then we would just rummage through all these old comic books and just make a day of it. And then on the way home, there was a Thrifties. We'd get an ice cream cone, and then we would buy some of the first-run Marvel DC books that were on the newsstand. So it was, these are great memories. These are fond memories. And so what happened, and I found this out, I think, before I started working professionally, because I'd go to swap meets and you'd see comic books without covers on them. So I'd ask the guys, like, why don't these have covers on them? And they said, well, they're returnable books. And I was like, what's a returnable book? And he'd say, well, like newsstands, whatever they don't sell, if they rip the cover off, they get credit back from the publishers. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I just kind of locked that back in my memory banks and didn't think too much of it. And then when I started, I think it was about mid-early 80s, I think it was DC mainly started going with direct market. So they would put out these direct market books, and so they still had the newsstand, but then they had these direct market books. So I think, how did they do it? They hedged their bets. Either they put it out newsstand first and then direct market, or it was direct market first and then newsstand. I can't remember the order that they did this for, but there'd basically be two versions of this book, and I think they were just trying to wean themselves off of the newsstand. And by this time, 7-Elevens were carrying it. It was actually I think there were even more distribution areas for comic books then than there were even when I was young, because there was 7-Eleven now. And so, yeah, they became returnable. So whatever the liquor store or the supermarket or the Five and Dime or whatever didn't sell, they could return and they could get credit for it, and then they could put that into their next order. And so I think what Marvel and then DC wanted to do is they wanted to take that risk out. So they wanted to sell the books outright to the vendors and then get money. So they didn't have to wait. I think there was a 3-month or 4-month or something. There was some kind of weird pay period. So they had to wait for these vendors to pay them. So the money wasn't like upfront and it wasn't quick. But once you get into the cycle, you're still making money every month. It would be hard to start it up, but once you get going. So I think they just wanted to take the risk out of it, and they wanted to get paid for every book made and that was distributed. So that's what they did. And so they kind of weaned themselves off of the newsstand. So the newsstand started dying mid-80s, later. I think there were a few. I think 7-Eleven was probably one of the big holdouts. Because I think you could still get, because even when I was doing Adventures of Superman, you could still get some of the main core titles at 7-Eleven. Because I do remember having a conversation with Mike Carlin about Superman, because at the time there were 4 Superman titles, and they all kind of worked as one story arc. So they all went into the next story, which is oh yeah, Hellstrom, the son of Satan. Thank you, Dark Admiral. That's cool. Yeah, I got the #1 issue. I probably had the first 10 or so of those books. They were pretty awesome. And so where was I? Yeah, that they would. They had 4 Superman titles. Death of my lord. Yeah, it was a little clickbaity, but actually, we'll see. We'll get around to it. I'm doing the history right now, Sierra. And so I remember talking to Mike Carlin, who was the editor of Superman Comics at the time. We had 4 titles, and I remember there was only one title, one of the Superman, and I think it was actually the Superman title that 7-Eleven carried. And then I said, they can't get the 3 other books. They can't get the continuation of this story. So that's not good, right? And he said, well, then they're just going to have to go to the direct market or whatever. I'm like, how do they even know that? How do they know? Like, they're going to buy one Superman book, and then they're not going to get a conclusion to the story. Then they're going to have to scramble and try to figure out how they can get that next book. I said, that's not acceptable. And I mean, how do you swim upstream? How do you make these points get across to powerful people, the people that are in charge? And I'm sure that he saw merit in it. He just didn't really want to deal with a freelancer's observation about, comic books selling or not selling. So that's one of the first, when I was really conscious that things weren't working, because I'm like, we're working on one continual story arc that happens every month between 4 books. But the newsstand cannot get those 4 books. They only get maybe an issue at best. So I thought that was, I'm just going to say, I thought that was, it's not only bad marketing, but it's kind of a cheap shot. It's a cheap shot to that kid that puts down the couple bucks for that comic book and doesn't get a continuation of the story, and has absolutely no idea how to get the other issues to complete the story. So it's kind of a cheap shot. I didn't like it at the time, and looking back, I still don't really like it. And when you look back, it was the beginning of the end, because they were placating a certain marketplace. They were placating the direct market, the specialty shops, no longer the mainstream. Well, the specialty shops do not get the eyes that a chain store does, or even a local 5 and dime that is dealing with their small community. They know what's selling, they know what's not selling. Hey, Eric S., welcome. They don't know. So I think it was just a series of dominoes that fell, and that was the main one, I believe, because how do you get new readers in if you cannot get them in front of new eyes? If they do not know that comic books even exist, how are they going to buy them? It's absolutely, I'm just going to say, it's asinine. It is completely asinine. Coca-Cola sells itself, but yet you see ads everywhere. So the one thing that always bugged me about comic books after the newsstand went out of fashion, I guess, is that there was never anything that was viable to replace it. There wasn't an advertising campaign that Marvel and DC put together. There wasn't any way to let mainstream people, just normal people that may or may not have wanted to buy these comics, but had no idea that they even existed. And then we have generations now, decades of kids that may not even know that the comic book exists, period. They just don't know. They think Marvel and DC, those movies, are just movies. They have no idea that they're even books. So this is a problem. There are many other problems, but like I said, this is kind of the history of how we got here. So I think more and more the industry started placating the direct market. I have nothing against direct market. I have nothing against mom and pop comic book shops. I have no problem with that. But if you can't advertise, one, if the shop can't advertise that they have comic books to their community, to their neighborhoods, then how are kids going to know? So most comic book shops that I have known in the past did not make any effort to advertise that they even had a shop there. They kind of expected people just to find them. And I think Marvel and DC expect the same thing. They just expect people to find comic books. And I'm sorry, that is an unacceptable way of doing business. I use this as an analogy. When I was a kid, comic books and candy, like a Snickers bar or a Reese's cup or whatever it was, Butterfingers, they were all about the same cost as a comic book. So when your mom or whoever you went shopping with, as an impulse item, they could buy you a comic book for the same price they could buy you a candy bar, and so, I want to back up for a minute too. You guys probably hear a little bit of noise. I have the air conditioning on and I cannot turn it off, otherwise I'll be just a sweaty mess. It's a little hot here, and in California right now. So I apologize for the the sound. So Eric S, I'm going to the chat here. We are old, Art. I used to go to 7-Eleven, yeah, and Walden bookstores to get my comics. Thor 349, Simonson, Justice League 212, Perez were my first book. Yeah, you could actually go to mainstream outlets. I forgot all about Walden's. Yeah, they used to carry comics too. And so, anyway, that's kind of where we're at. Comic book shops were like the last outpost for the industry. So we bet the farm, and I say we as a collective industry, we put everything on red, and then we just let it ride, and never really did anything to change it. And then the 90s came, and kind of we did well in the industry, but we placated a certain group of people, and the industry sort of grew, but it grew in a way that couldn't sustain itself. It grew in a way that wasn't substantial. So I even remember talking to some of the Image guys, because I worked at Extreme Studios, you guys, Rob Liefeld's Extreme Studios, which was in the same building on the same floor as the main Image office. So I would hang out with those Image guys, marketing, all those guys, and I'd ask, I say, is any of this money that's going into the Image kitty, is any of this money going into advertising? Or is Image Comics advertising to the main, populace? And not really. So they were making millions and millions of dollars a month. They had the money to advertise. They had the money to start trying to get the word out in a bigger way. But instead, they placated a collector group. They placated the sure money, and not that was bad, but it shouldn't have been an either or. It should have been both. It should have been try to get into the mainstream more while you have those eyes on you, while you have this power, while you have this clout. But everybody just kind of thought of their own studio and their own IPs and their selves. They didn't think how they could expand the market. And I do remember, this was around the same time, maybe a few years later. I used to have a lot of friends, including Gareb Shamus over at Wizard Comics. And I remember going out to dinner with a bunch of those guys. And they were talking that they tried to get Image, Marvel, DC, and I think Dark Horse, and maybe even Malibu at the time to the table to talk about a way that they could collectively advertise. That they could advertise in a mainstream sort of way comic books, and try to get new eyes, because like I said, there were millions of dollars. They could have went and to a New York ad agency and created an ad campaign to sell comic books. I mean, they have commercials that sell candy bars. Those aren't even as expensive as a comic book now. So if they can put the money together for candy bar, why not a comic book? Every other industry, every other product advertises. Comic books don't. So they tried to do that, and what their solution was, everybody would put the same amount of money in to the kitty. So it was like an advertising fund. So everybody who wanted to be part of this would put X amount of dollars in, and it would have to be equal, otherwise it wouldn't work. And then they would use that money, and however much money they had every month to work with is what they would do advertising wise. And I thought it made a ton of sense to me. It made so much sense. Hey, if you guys could tweet this out, because I think this is gold. I think there's some people that might want to hear this. So if you have any friends that are interested in comic books, please. I'm trying to get more eyes on this channel, so I greatly appreciate it. Thank you. So so what happened was Marvel, DC, the power players were like, what would we advertise? We have a whole universe of books. What would we advertise? And they were just like, we would advertise, I don't know, whatever you wanted to sell it that month, whatever you thought was viable. Or we would just advertise comic books as a collective. And then if comic book shops wanted to be involved, they could throw in money too. So at the end of the commercial or whatever, it could say, and these are the shops that you can get comic books. So you're advertising the product and you're advertising the venue where you can pick them up. So anyways, I thought it made a lot of sense. Those guys at Image were like, we don't understand their mindset. We don't understand why they didn't want to do this. And it came down to ego. It came down to, we don't want Marvel. We can't trust that Marvel would get more, commercial time than DC would or whatever. So they just fought and they got paranoid and they just didn't want to share. They didn't want to work together. And in the meantime, most of those studios or most of those publishing houses, DC, Marvel, were owned by subsidiaries that were billion-dollar corporations. DC was Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers was Time Warner at the time. They had distribution in mainstream areas. At the time, TV Guide was still being published, Time Magazine, all those publications that were at the checkout stand, that's DC. That's Warner Brothers. I never understood why there was never any money invested in advertising. I know they make more money off their IPs, but if it's truly about comic books and selling comic books, if candy can sell, why can't comic books sell? At one point they were pretty much neck and neck, and you have to let people know that the product exists. So that's that didn't happen, and then the Image boom or the 90s boom collapsed around 96, 97, and so everything just slowly went back to what it was. It normalized because of the speculators were leaving and things like that. So instead of thinking long term, they just thought short term and made money for themselves. And a lot of people did very, very well in the short term. But the comics industry never grew. It never got bigger. And I remember Frank Miller said something about the comics industry is very humble. They're very humble, timid, and they don't like to make waves. So they just kind of accept whatever happens. They're just kind of happy that there's anybody buying their books. And Frank, even at the time, was saying that's unacceptable. He said after the McCarthy time when they were censoring comics, and they said, the seduction of the innocent and all that the comics industry kind of ran scared, and we've been running scared ever since. And that was Frank's observation, and I think he's right. I think instead of being loud and proud about what we do and about these IPs and about these great adventures and everything else, we're just kind of, just nervous and scared that we're not going to work the next month, and that we'll just be happy with the few people that buy the books. So the ambition level went down, and I think it was, I don't know, I want to say it was EVS, but it might have been somebody else. I listened to so many different shows, but they said if this was any other industry, and people, maybe it was Sean Gordon Murphy, because he's pretty verbal about this stuff too. If this was any other industry, people would be screaming, we can't feed our children, we can't pay our mortgage, we can't do X, Y, Z. And then the corporations would have to do something to compensate people to exist, to make ends meet. And so, but nobody does that. Nobody did that. And there was a time when people talked about collective bargaining, strength in numbers. And I think that does work. There have been unions that have formed, things like that. I think unions have been bastardized over the years and aren't as good as they maybe once were, but usually they work initially, unionizing. But how do you collect, like that ship has sailed. You can't collectively bargain now. It's a world global market. At the time it was a regional thing. Most people that did comics worked on the East Coast. A lot of this stuff was pre-Federal Express, pre-internet. So if there was a time to unionize, it would have been then, because you could unionize a group of people and put some pressure on the publishers. but we can't anymore because there's still people talking about trying to do it, but I just don't know how you would do it. Like in a global economy, and also a lot of people in Brazil and the Philippines and these different places, they're making good money comparative to their cost of living. It's only in the United States and places where the cost of living is a little bit more expensive that comic book artists are having a hard time, making ends meet. So none of this stuff is acceptable. None of this stuff is going to help the industry. But I do believe, this is a shout out to anybody that's in the comic book industry that's working right now. Start putting pressure on Marvel and DC. Start asking for more money. I have this conversation all the time. This will be a topic for another time, but I talked to a bunch of inkers, which I will not name their names right now, but we talked about doing an Inkers of the Round Table and doing it through, Inkwell. They had the Inkwell Awards, and it's Bob Aumann and stuff like that. And I had a lot of people when I would do conventions in the past. I would talk to mainly inkers, and I'd say, how much do you make? And they go, well, it's not really right to talk about money. And I said, it is right. We should compare our rates. And I said, why? I said, because what they're doing is they are using your rate against this other guy. So if this guy is willing to work for $50 a page, and then that becomes the norm, then guess what? That's how much they're going to pay you. They're going to start going with the lower page rate versus the higher page rate. And it did happen. And it has been happening since. So I said, if all the inkers, if it's common knowledge that we know how much each other's making, then they can't lowball us. And then it's only up from there. And any new guys that come up, we try to educate them as the older guys and say, no, this is how much you should be making. Don't take anything less than this. And I know this is progressive, and I know that Marvel and DC don't want anybody talking like this. But you know what? This is what has to happen, because if you do put the pressure on Marvel DC, either they're going to go belly up, and if that's the case, then so be it. If they can't make ends meet and they can't make their business work, then that's what should happen. I'm sorry if it sounds cold-blooded, but when we bailed out the auto industry some years back, I was like, let them go. I mean, there are going to be people that are going to lose their job, and it sounds cold-blooded, but you know what? Somebody's going to buy those factories, and they're going to employ those people, and they're going to start building cars again. They're going to make them better and cheaper, and they're going to treat the employees better. So let the old die for the new to come up and try something better. And at least that's how I feel at this moment in time. And I felt that way, too, just before I left DC. And I would tell people that this is what we need to do. We need to share this information. And I wanted to do inker panels and get inkers together and do a Q&A and start trying to get the younger people, and even people that worked, in other places, in other parts of the world, to realize we cannot undercut our brethren. We can't do this because it doesn't make any sense in the long term. Because if I'm making $200 a page and there's a new guy that's willing to take $40 a page, then why would they use me? Even though I have cachet, they know that I can bring a certain amount of people to the book and legitimacy, and that I'm good for my word, that I've been proven that I can, make a deadline. And these guys are unproven. But when you start undercutting somebody like that, all of a sudden their bottom line becomes way more attractive. And so then they hire those guys. And then what happens is 20, 30 years from that moment that guy got that $40 page rate, they're in the same place that I am. They're going to have to deal with the same problems of some young guy coming in and undercutting them and making their jobs more scarce. And not that happened to me, you guys, because it didn't. I was not a charity case, and when I left DC, I was still riding high. I was working on Super Sons. It was a great selling book. I chose to leave because I want to try to do something different, to try to not save the industry, but maybe recreate or change things in a way that might become more viable. Basically, to make comic books that are uniquely me and my vision and my creative, ideas, and try to market them as best as I can, and then bring them right to people like yourselves. Market them directly to people, and also show them, update them, let them know the progress of things, which is another thing about the Marvel DC way of doing business. They have one piece of artwork that they put into a distributor catalog and expect a retailer or a direct market comic shop to buy that, basically sight unseen. They just have a cover and a small paragraph that says what it is. So they have to kind of read between the lines. They don't know what this product is. At least before those books became returnable. So if DC or Marvel put out a book that they couldn't sell, they weren't stuck with it, but they're stuck with it now. And so that's why you see a lot of conservative ordering. You see a lot of these direct market comic shops being very, very conservative because they can't take a chance. They can't order even by their gut what they think will sell, what they won't sell. And that's why these big crossover events are very attractive to them, because they're the only things that Marvel and DC are getting behind. They're the only things that they're telling the retailers and giving them some kind of, confidence that they're going to sell through on these books, because that's where they're putting their time and their energy in. And I just think that's short-sighted as well, because everything becomes an event, and then people just get burnt out on the events. I still believe in one-and-dones. I think that Marvel and DC should do more one-and-dones. And when they talk about that, if some kid's buying comic books today, they have all of this backstory, and that's daunting and overwhelming. I'm just going to call foul right now. It's not daunting and overwhelming. If we had comic book shops that carried back issues, because when I was a kid and I got a book and I wanted to know more about Daredevil or whatever, I went and I scoured the back issues and I bought everything I could on Daredevil, and I found out his history, and I went all with that. It's a conceit that's not true. It's not true. It is kind of now, because a lot of direct market comic shops don't carry back issues, because the shops are so small. They can only carry, they only have room for the new books. But I think that if they did have back issues, I think, and then if they instructed people to go and say, oh, you want more Daredevil? I have 10 years worth of Daredevil history right there at a reasonable price. What comic book fan would not lose their shit over that? Because I did. I know they would too. And that's, I'm sorry if I'm seemingly getting into a rant, because I don't mean to, but this is another thing about the industry, is I don't think Marvel and DC know who they're selling to. I don't think they know who their clientele is. And when I was a kid and when I broke into the business, the industry knew what their clientele were. They knew what the fan base were. I don't think they know anymore. And just to back up further, I remember having this conversation with Jim Lee, and we were talking about, and this was his observation, and it's a mainstay observation, but I had never heard it until he said it. He said comic book readers have 10 years where they're interested in comic books, and then they move on. And so it really is from like 5 to 12, or 8 to 14, or whenever you start and to where you kind of lose interest in comic books. And they're meant to be young kids entertainment, and even like I don't know, early tweens, form of entertainment. This is why there are different books, you guys. When you're very young, you have little kid books. There's even toddler books. So all these books are designed for different ages: toddlers, young kids, bedtime stories. All these books are tailored for different things. And then there's young people books. I don't know, Dick and Jane. I don't know what would be considered. I guess like the Willy Wonka books and the Roald Dahl books and those different. Is he the one that wrote? Who am I thinking? Willy Wonka and all those. And James the Giant Peach and all those type of, Mary Poppins, all those books. And you start reading those. But at the same time, you start reading comic books, action adventures, man, heroic tales. So that appeals to that age group. Yowza Comics. Yo, Artie, hey, how you doing, man? And welcome to the chat. And so, yeah, so there's a time in a person's life that you read comic books. And this is for the norm. This is for the average person, right? They read the comic from anywhere between 5 and 14 years old. And then they start reading real books. And if they're still interested in action adventure, they're probably reading, the Edgar Rice Burroughs stuff and the Jules Verne's. I know I did. Ray Bradbury, even Philip K. Dick. You start reading, those books, and you get into, novels, like pulp novels, things like that. And then you continue to read, but you kind of still like similar subject matter, but it's more adult. It's more written to a certain age group. And the reason why this is truth and factual, and I'll argue this debate with anybody, is Ronald Dahl. Yeah, thank you. Is who's gonna buy a book called Spider-Man? Who's going to be attracted to a book called Batman or Superman? A young kid. An adult is not going to buy a book like that. And I'm talking about an adult that is just getting into comic books, not an adult that has been reading since childhood and still loves comic books. Which, by the way, I'm not casting shade on anybody, and I'm not saying any of these things are bad, because I'm not. Because I kind of got out of comic books, like I said, cars and girls and rock and roll. But you know what? I got back into them, around, I don't know, 18, 19, I kind of came back. And what did attract me was the more adult comics. There was a company called Pacific Comics, and they were from San Diego, and they started making more adult comics. One of the comics I absolutely loved was Rocketeer. So I started reading those comic books, and actually Savage Sword, the magazine Savage Sword of Conan that Marvel was putting out. I was reading those, the black and white magazine size books, and they were kind of more adult, sword and sorcery kind of adventures, and I dug those, and they kind of appealed to me more. And so I'm not saying that comic books can't be everything to everybody, but I'm talking about mainly Marvel DC books. When you talk about, Spider-Man, Superman, Batman, the mainstays, those appeal to a young kid. There's a guy that gets bit by a spider and gets spider powers. Logically, that doesn't even make any sense. If somebody got bit by a radioactive spider, they would probably die horribly, if indeed anything happened at all. That's reality. That's how an older person would think about the concept. But a younger kid, they accept it. And that's why they work. They work based on a younger kid. And if you're older and you're still buying comics and enjoying those stories, more power to you. You know, I still love that stuff. I'm in a constant state of arrested development. If you looked at my studio, you'd go, what is this, a kid's room? You know, it's pretty nuts. But that is the reality, and I think we need to face that reality. And when Marvel and DC, they're placating a certain group of people. They're placating an older group of people that, well, they were. I mean, Marvel's not even doing that anymore. That's why they're having a problem. But they were kind of making stories for older people and older readers. And I think that's not bad. But where are the younger kids? Where's their entertainment? And I'm not talking about, you know, patronizing younger kids and making comic books for like little children and stuff like that. Hell, when I was a kid, they were getting into some serious subject matter when I was a kid, but it was still kind of superficial. It wasn't what they call adult. But really, when DC and Marvel say adult, it really is just gratuitous. The subject matter isn't any more adult. When you show Batman's wee-wee, that's just gratuitous. That's not adult. When you show, I remember Gail Simone's Batgirl, no wonder it wasn't selling. That thing, every cover was Batgirl getting her skull smashed in and a ton of blood everywhere. I don't want to see my hero, you know, getting beat up all the time and just failing miserably. You know, I want to see good versus evil. I want to see good triumph over evil. I don't want to see this sad beat down stuff. Who wants that? And also, like I said, they mistake adult for gratuitous. It's totally different. When they did the Iron Man, what was it, Ghost in a Bottle or whatever that story was, the Iron Man story, that was fairly adult, but it was still like kids could read it. You know, it wasn't gratuitous. They didn't show, you know, Tony puking, and they didn't show like the gruesome reality of alcoholism. You know, they kept it fairly superficial, but the subject matter was more adult. You know, they were getting into a subject matter that was good for, you know, or that was something that a younger person could understand. Demon in a Bottle. Thank you, Mark C. And Daniel C. Demon in a Bottle. Isn't it that Sting song, right? That Police song? I love that song. Demon in a Bottle. It's all about Tony Stark's alcoholism. If you guys get a chance, look up Demon in a Bottle by the Police. It's amazing. It's not Demon in a Bottle. What's up? Art Rich Studios. I like both names there. Yeah, so like I said, I didn't really want to turn this into a rant, but these are all observations that I've had over the 35 years, and also being a kid that grew up reading comic books and that absolutely loves them, loves the medium, loves everything about it. And these are things that I think are flawed. And now, you know, Marvel specifically are trying to placate a certain group of people, you know, like, but it's always at the cost of the other people. Like, let me just back up for 1 minute here. Okay, I'm an adult now. I still like reading comic books. I don't like current comic books. I read older comic books. The reason I don't like the new ones is, like I said, they're gratuitous and they're just not as much fun. I just want to read fun action adventure. And the thing is, I'm not a comic book snob either. I like The Watchmen. I liked Dark Knight Returns. But the thing is, these don't have to be either or scenarios. Vertigo can exist. They could be, you know, late teens, early 20 books, you know, that appeal to an older audience. And we can do Elseworld tales like Dark Knight Returns. Just make sure that they're Elseworlds. Like, where they get into trouble is when they get greedy and try to bring Killing Joke into the mainstream storytelling. Like, the Killing Joke was an Elseworld story. It wasn't part of the continuity. So have books called Elseworlds. I loved those books. What if? Tell those stories. Maybe even make them for younger kids. They don't even have to be adult or gratuitous. But keep your Elseworld ideas there because they're fun. But now they're bringing Elseworld ideas into continuity. And then they're saying that this is the way things are now. And I just think that's just a big mistake. Just, like I said earlier, make one and dones. If you want to do Elseworld stories, make sure they're Elseworld stories. If you want to make more adult Marvel and DC Universe stuff, make them more adult. Keep them away from kids, and then just have your normal line of comic books that appeals to everybody. Because this is my take on this about older readers. Is there's a conceit, like Marvel and DC made this conceit, like there's older readers now and there's not as many young people reading comics. So we need to reflect their buying, like what they want, right? Well, to me, I didn't want my comic books to be more adult, even as an adult. I just wanted the same thing. Like if you like Hanna-Barbera cartoons, you like Hanna-Barbera cartoons. You don't want to start seeing Yogi Bear be more adult. You don't want to see Scooby-Doo. Well, they're doing that stuff now, but I don't think you really want that. I don't think you want to see Looney Tunes be more adult. I don't think you want to see the Disney stable of Mickey Mouse, Donald, and Goofy. I don't think you want to see that stuff more adult. You just want to see what you like, and hey, Rodwell, what's up? You just want to see what you like. And let's face it, we're all kind of juvenile in our tastes anyway. So to try to legitimize a character like Batman or Spider-Man and make them more adult, it doesn't work. The concept's called Spider-Man. The concept's called Batman. It's only going to appeal to little kids, younger people. It's not going to appeal to older people. But if you can hook those kids like they did me, and I imagine everybody in the chat, you're going to fondly remember those times, and you're going to keep reading comic books into your adulthood. Hopefully you start reading other books as well. It doesn't have to be an either or, but you start reading what you like, and you like good, clean action adventure, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, Hannah the Barbarian. I don't know. I mean, this is my rant. What do you guys think? How do you feel about... And I know I covered a lot of things, but maybe just how do you feel about comic books trying to reach an older audience at the same time ignoring, maybe the 6-7-year-old to 14-year-olds, that just maybe want good, clean action adventure. And like I said, I'm not talking about little kiddie books either. I'm talking about normal comic books that we grew up with. They can deal with adult, content or more adult ideas, but not necessarily gratuitous or in a way that Marvel and DC are doing them. And also, just to bring this up, since I'm kind of tangenting, well, one, what do you guys think of that in the chat? And then I'll go into a different area for a minute. Is when they start making, like, we want to attract this type of person to comic books or that type of person to comic books. Hey, listen, it's all the above. Make comic books for everybody. If the book is selling, more power to you, man. If you want to make these books, fine, do it. But the problem is when you start trying to change these icon characters, these legacy characters, and you start trying to change them into a way that almost feels like it's an agenda. It almost feels like you have like some kind of agenda that you're pushing, and that's when it's a no-no. Try to appeal to as many people as possible. Try to make get a general readership in there. And then if you want to make these specialty comic books, then do them like I was saying with Elseworlds, or create a brand new character that is LGBT, or that is an old man, or whatever it is that you want to try to create, a more ethnically diverse character. But don't, or more female centric, but don't change what people know and love to try to appeal to this new group. Because on one hand, you're kind of, you're putting a block on one person while trying to gain the attention of another person, and I just don't think it's a good way of doing business. It should be all the above. Let's make it all. And if a book cannot stand on its own, then let's not say it's because of homophobic or alt-right or whatever behavior. Let's just go, the book didn't sell, let's do it better the next time out. It's a monthly medium, we'll get them next time. That used to be when I came up in the industry, we'd just go, hey, we'll get them next month, right? We'll do it better next month. And that's a healthy way of looking at it, and just keep growing and changing. But these mandates on high from Marvel DC to instruct creators to do what they're doing isn't going to help. It's hurting things, and it's making it harder, quite frankly, for some of these direct market comic shops to do business, because that's just not their clientele. So also Marvel DC, unless you're willing to put money where your mouth is and truly advertise these new comic books that you're trying to create, with your agenda, then shut the hell up, as far as I'm concerned. Stop trying to piggyback off of proven successes and try to get your agendas going, because it's just not helping. It's not helping it's not helping the industry at all. It's not helping anybody, and it's kind of putting the middle finger up to people that have supported you in the past and that do support these local comic book shops with their money. And also, just, this is my last, is the price has to come down. It used to compete with like candy, like I said earlier, but we also need to bring the price down to where it's more doable as just an impulse item. Kids need access. Just to sum up, okay, kids need access to these things so they can be impulse items, so they can tug on their mom's shirt and say, hey, can you buy me a comic book? I was good in the store. The little bribery thing that most parents do. And then little Timmy's hooked, or little Susie's hooked. And then they go the next time and they get their next comic, and so on, which is how, most of our addictions started. So then you have that. So make them accessible, bring down the price, and you can bring down the price with volume. If you guys start selling more books, then you can lower the price. The reason they have to be so expensive is because they're selling to specialty shops and they're just not getting the distribution. The reason candy can stay low and soda pop and all these other things that kids like is because they're low. Yeah, Eric, I know Alterna's doing things like that. They're going back to newsprint, and they're printing in a less expensive way to try to attract more people, and more power to them, man. I think also, let me finish summing up, and then I'll bring this back to a quote. I'm writing it down so I don't forget. Lower the price, get the distribution up, and don't placate little kids, don't make little kid books, but just make what I call good, clean action adventure. Make these books fun, and just start doing one and dones. Just do one and dones. Oh, what is this? Oh my God, Art, can you stop spilling truth? My millennial ears can't stand it. Well, I'm sorry, Martin. I'm sure you love comic books. I love comic books, and this is just how I see them over like 3.5 decades worth of working professionally in this industry, and also just what it was like, before when I was a kid buying comic books. And so I think those are the main things: price, distribution, and just make more one and dones, and make stuff that's more universally appealing to a wide array of clientele. Men, women, girls, boys, I don't know, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, just represent, man. Just make books, and if they sell, then keep making them. If they don't, alter the course and try something else. That's my hope. I started this up with the death of comic books, but that's my hope, and I'm not sure that it can be done. I've seen a lot of ebb and flow in my 35 years in this industry, so I'm a little more hopeful than most, because I have seen the industry kind of where people talk like this in the past, said it's the death of comic books, and then something happens, and then just they just go through the roof. So I never say never. I'm still very hopeful, but I'm trying something different. I'm bringing my comic books, my IPs, my ideas directly to you guys. And as long as you support them, then it's going to work. And I know you listen to other live streams where they talk about comic books and things. And one of the statistics that mainstream comic books are taking is they are starting to bring in crowdfunding books and create their own IPs into their overall sales totals to try to make it seem like comic books are doing better. So I believe this is the wave of the future, making books, bringing them directly to the masses, marketing them and selling them to you guys, which, by the way, for your time, and you're indulging, an old man. What started off as just, a history turned into a little bit of a rant. I have a cover layout, and I have a cover of Chrono Mechanics that I am going to show you, because I don't believe in not being transparent, and I believe in showing you guys the progress of these things. Even before I got Chrono Mechanics up as a campaign, I'm showing you guys the evolution of the cover and some of this other cool stuff. Because if I was breaking in, or I was just starting to read comic books, and I had access to this stuff, you better believe it, I'd be all over it. I would love the hell out of seeing some of my favorite comic book covers. Can you imagine seeing Kirby drawing some of these masterpiece, like covers and interiors, live, doing a live stream in the day, and you guys getting to be privy to that stuff? And I hate, just to back up, I'm not saying that I am Jack Kirby or any of that, but if I had access to that, I think that would be, nothing short of amazing. So I did ask a question. It's no longer monthly medium. Everybody writes for trade. Comic shop margins are so tight, they are never back issues when you want. So you want to trade? Yeah, rendering monthly is useless. Yeah, and that's also killing the back market too. So if people can wait for the trade, then that's kind of like getting a back issues as well. So I don't know, is it an either or? Maybe go back further. I know that comic shops would have to have more stock on hand, but maybe go beyond, the printed trades. I don't know. I don't really have the answers. These are just observations. But thanks, Mark C, for adding your 2 cents. Want to make comics that are more intelligent and written for adults. Doesn't have to be edgy and cursing all the time, like a Tom Clancy book in comic book format. Yeah, exactly. Art Rich Studios. Thanks for that input. That was pretty cool. That was Jim Lee. Wow. Yeah, I mean, in the day, Jim and I hung out quite a bit. He had a lot of good observations. I have a lot of observations of where Jim's at now, but I think I'm going to keep a lot of that stuff to myself for now. I think they're, just in a nutshell, I think there's some conflicts of interest that happen sometimes when you get these corporate jobs. So that's all I'm going to say there. Glad I backed Black and White when I could. Also got the art book too. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And the book is done, and we're just waiting back to get the last of the quotes for the printer. But the book is done, and all of the stretch goal stuff are pretty much made, with the exception of the ash can isn't a stretch goal, but the trading cards. The trading cards have yet to be printed up, so I think we just have the ash can, the 16-page ash can. The 90s ash can's already done. So the 16-page ash can, the book itself, and the trading card. I believe that's all we have left as far as printable material. So thank you again. And I do have a campaign coming out soon. I was hoping the end of the month, but it's probably going to be more like mid to late September on Chrono Mechanics. But like I said, I'm going to show you guys a cover. And there was that quote that I was going to share with you that I wrote down, and it was from Prince, the musician Prince, of all people. And this is when he kind of lost his IP to a corporate entity, which was the name of Prince. That's why he went to a symbol. So the symbol was like so he could keep doing music, but without giving the rights and stuff to the corporate master. And so what he said, and I believe there's a quote from David Bowie as well, which is similar, and I think he started putting out music and selling it directly to people like I'm doing with comic books right now, is that real change is not going to come from these corporations. So Marvel and DC, if we keep looking to them to save the industry, I don't really think they are. I think it's people that are taking a chance, not to pat myself on the back, because I'm not the first one that made this plunge, and I'm not the first one that started crowdfunding, but I have been crowdfunding for maybe the past 5 years, maybe even 6 years, with different projects. So I saw the writing on the wall, but now I'm fully engulfed in it. This is where I want to stay, and this is where I want to be. So so I think this is viable right now. When you have people putting up 1 million sales on a single issue of comic books, and that there's a clientele, there's a group of there's a fan base out there that's willing to back this. Not just like I'm going to share this as a post, but you guys are sharing that. You guys are supporting this stuff with your money. You guys are here with me in the chat right now. Believe me, I do not take this stuff for granted. This stuff gets me excited. This stuff keeps me up at night when I'm just thinking about how I can share stuff with you. I just have to get the confidence now just to speak to you guys for an hour or whatever and rant and be okay with that. But because that's the main platform to help sell these comic books. But I'm getting over that. Everything's moving forward. And so Martin says, Art, I backed the Oodles comic and Ashcan. Can't wait. Thank you so much, all you guys. You guys are the best. And I think I pretty much covered everything I wanted to cover. So I hope I didn't bore you. But those are just observations, I've had. I don't really have any solutions other than the ones that I summed up. And I don't know how they're going to implement those with business the way it is and the template that they've created. I think what Marvel and DC are doing, their corporate or overloads, are just starting to sign off on the comic book aspects altogether and just calling them a lifestyle brand and just making it all encompassing, the comics with t-shirts or comic books with, Pops toys or whatever the heck, they're doing. And, that's where they're going with this stuff. But the way I look at it, I believe there are people that want this kind of entertainment. People go out in droves and support these Marvel and DC movies, these action adventure stories. Oh, you guys, that's my air conditioner relieving itself. I know it sounds a little rude, but it collects condensation, so I opened up the little valve so it drains, and then I use that water to water my plants because, you know, I look out for the environment because I care. I care, damn it. I care. So Comics Legend says, Art, can you do a stream about your time on X-Men and working with Jim Lee and show some art as well? That would be epic. Yes, Comic Book Legend, or Comics Legend, I have Xeroxes of work in progress, and I think there's some Jim Lee pencils, my inks, and maybe even some Scott Williams inks, and also Will's Portaccio. Like, we used to just share studio space. I'd go down to San Diego. They would come up to South Bay, and we would work, in each other's studios and do these X-Men books. And so we were all pretty much interconnected, where we were also influencing each other, bringing new ideas and approaches to the books and sharing everything that we were doing. So yes, that would be very, very cool, and I have been thinking about how to do that. I just have to go downstairs, and in this heat, the garage is absolutely a nightmare. But maybe I'll do it in one of these evenings. Bring a big fan out there and look through all my. I have boxes, Federal Express boxes of Xeroxes and stuff, and I hope they haven't deteriorated too much. But yeah, that would be cool to share with you guys. Even maybe I could scan them and show them in a better light than just holding them up for the camera, because that's not the best way to view things. So Eric S. says, wait, you're not going to call me names. You're not going to push my agenda through your book. I mean, unless you want, Eric. I mean, you pay me enough, I'll do it. I'm not above it. You're not going to tell me it's not made for me. No way, no way. I want this stuff as general of an audience as I can reach, because I have no agenda other than that. I'm going to have to get used to this professionalism. That's hilarious, man. Yeah, so if you guys have also ideas, put them into not just the chat here, but in the comments. That would be awesome. So who came up with the idea about the Jim Lee? Oh, Comics Legend. So if you guys have ideas of things that you might want me to cover, let me know in the comments. I don't always get back to you guys in the comments, but I do read everything in the comments. So that might be fun too. So then I can tailor these live streams to more what you guys want me to talk about, which is no problem, because quite frankly, I run out of things to talk about. So without further ado, let me go OBS. Let me share this with you guys. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? There it is. So here it is. I think I need to go here. This is the cover to Chrono Mechanics Retrofit Issue 1. So this is the brand new cover. I finished this a couple days ago, and it's at the colorist now. It's a brilliant colorist. His name's Sean Ellery, and he's kind of my mainstay Chrono colorist. So he does my high-end covers and pinups. So he's exceptionally good, and he usually, I say usually, knows what I like as far as the Chrono Mechanics stuff. So I love this. If you guys haven't seen, there's part 1 and part 2 where I bring the cover together, mostly in the form of, I think I showed the layout too, but mostly in the form of inking. I think you see some of the blue lines as well. So you can see this come together. So I think that's 2 videos back. So also, if you guys go back and look at the videos, please like them. It helps the algorithm. Like I said, I'm trying to build this platform and trying to get people here. I actually, last night I broke 1,700, so I was exceptionally happy, but I need to go well above that with the way YouTube works, because sometimes it goes down quite a bit and then builds back up. So if you guys can help me get the word out, I would greatly appreciate it. So yeah, this is the cover. So the guy in the front is a Chrono Mechanics. Well, spoiler alert, he will be a mechanic. But right now he's kind of a self-absorbed 70s rock god, as we call him. And so he's kind of like, I don't know, Steven Tyler mixed with a Ted Nugent, with all that kind of 70s stuff. Like good, just 70s hard rock, not like heavy metal or anything. And so he was sporting a mullet a little bit before the mullet came out. So as all good rock and roll fashion is concerned, they usually, are trendsetters. So in this reality, in the Chrono Mechanics universe, Doug pretty much invented the mullet. So, and also in tradition of like Steven Tyler and Mick Jagger, he's ugly as sin. Like this guy is not pretty, but yet the ladies love him. So he's the newest recruit. So that's kind of the origin. This story will be the origin of Doug and how he comes into the team, the repair team, 9.2 of Sector 7, which is what the story focuses on. So the guy on the left with the sledgehammer, that is a character named Caravaggio, and he's loosely based on the artist Caravaggio, the real artist, Renaissance artist Caravaggio. So if you know about Caravaggio, he didn't quite get the accolades that he deserved while he was alive. So he didn't do all that well. So he's basically a frustrated musician. So, not a musician, an artist, I'm sorry, and an inventor from the Renaissance. So he gets recruited, not so much, it's kind of recruited to Chrono Inc. And so he goes from a potential of greatness, and he did later, get his greatness status. But in this storyline, he doesn't. And so he goes from this kind of overachiever, kind of greatness to being recruited as a chrono mechanic, which is pretty much just a pain in the ass job for these guys. They just look at it as like an obligation. It's a paycheck. They go in, punch the time clock, they do their job, and then they go back to their lives. So whenever they go to work, it's kind of like, most of us working stiffs. It's just, it's just something you do to get by. So there's nothing glamorous about it. They're just knuckle, busting, wrench turning, kind of, everyday mechanics. But they just happen to fix the big machine that's known as time. So it's a clockwork machinery that was built in the fabric of time and space when the universe was formed. So the machine is there and regulates all time and space. So don't take any of this this sci-fi stuff seriously, because it's all for fun. Yeah, this is very broad humor, very, very slapstick, over the top, kind of Looney Tunes meets H.G. Wells. That's the way I put it. So the guy on the right with the big wrench, his name's Oot, and he's our prehistoric caveman. But his claim to fame, we used to use this as a pitch. I don't know how people feel about it now, but he was we called him the prehistoric Donald Trump, because his claim to fame was real estate. He had the cave condo, and all the cave condos would come with their own fire. So he also claims that he invented fire. So you can see where this is going. Each one of these guys are like majorly overachievers in their time, and then they get recruited to Chrono Inc., and then they're just reduced to these, working class guys that just no one knows that they saved the universe time and time again, but they just do it. Unsung heroes, go do their job and then go home and quietly don't talk about it. It's just their pain in the ass job. So that's Oot. And then we have Zin, who's the guy with the welding torch on the top there. And he's from a made-up time, so we don't deal with just, actual timelines that exist, since this is fun and it's all made up. Zin is from a galaxy that I just made up. And so he was stranded there as a baby on this planet. And so the planet was inhabited, or was it? people say that there was no life form on the planet, but yet he thought that there was. So we don't really explain it, whether it's factual that there were these things that lived there or not, or if they were just imaginary to Zinn. But what Zinn did is he ended up ruling that life form as kind of a pseudo deity, and so his mantra was me, myself, and I. And he had the Trinity gem, and that's that little triangular shape that's floating by his head. That's the Trinity gem. And so it's a self-reliance mantra. This is my positive little, what do they call that? Hippie stuff, where it's me, myself, and I. So it's about being self-reliant. So that's what the Trinity gem is. And so he preaches the word to lower life forms throughout the galaxy, because nobody with a brain in their head would actually follow him. So that's the joke. So he's that. So when I was thinking about this, I started realizing that each one of these characters has a piece of my personality in them. So in the 70s, I played music as a kid, and was fairly successful at it. We played Hollywood, we played Gazzari's, Madame Wong's, the Whiskey, the Troubadour. We even did some of the Orange County clubs like Radio City and Woodstock. We played some of the local amusement parks like, Knott's Berry Farm. So I played in a band called TKO, Technical Knockout. So we played just, pretty much straightforward 70s rock. And so that's basically Doug. So Doug represents that part. Even though I was a drummer, I wasn't a guitar player. And then, obviously Caravaggio is an artist and somewhat of an inventor. So I'm an artist. And so then Oot is a prehistoric businessman. So I'm a little bit of a businessman, trying to get this comic book thing, this indie, crowdfund thing happening, and running my own studio, Hack Shack Studios. So a little bit of a businessman. And then Zinn, I've been known to pontificate from time to time, getting a little preachy, getting a little wordy, even in this stream, I did some of that. So that's Chronomechanics. So like I said, there's the cover. It's being colored right now. I'm hoping to have that done or to me by mid next week. So when I get that, I can show you guys. But I'm really proud. I really like the pen and ink job on this. I'll zoom it up a little bit. So it's a little bit of a different style than I work with. So there's a little bit more bloops. The outlines are a little thicker, more cartoony. And it's kind of got a European sensibilities to the inks. Some more astute people that I've gotten reviews from in the past say that not only does the style look like Mobius at times, that the story actually has an airtight garage, which is a Mobius story that was a stream of consciousness story, and kind of has a Hitchhiker's Guide feel to the story. So I think those are pretty good. They were pretty good reviews, and that's pretty much spot on explaining what the concept is and what it's about. So then there's that. And so what else do I have? I have this. So this is really, really rough, so don't hold this against me, you guys. I'm still working with placement, size, and actual full-on backgrounds. But I got hired by Dynamic Forces, or Dynamite, Nick Barucci, to do a Vampirilla black and white crossover cover. So similar to what the She and Vampirilla cover was, and the Cyber Frog Vampirilla covers. So this is first news, man. I'm doing a cover for those guys, and I imagine we're going to crowdfund it, and there'll be a lithograph, and we'll do the whole shebang like Ethan and the She campaign did. So we have that, and then like I said, I've been messing with stuff. So I went in and I changed the size a Vampirilla, because it's really is a Vampirilla cover. So I realized that she wasn't as dominant on the cover. So originally when I came up with the idea, I was thinking it would be like 3 of them, and they would all be like sharing the limelight together. But I think since it's a Vampirilla cover, I'm going to make her more in the forefront. So you can see the difference here. And also, I went in and started... I'm doing all this in Photoshop. Well, the initial drawing was paper and pen, but like this redrawing of the face, let me see, you can see it here. So this is this is big for a boomer. This is the face that I drew initially with the marker. I should just do a show on this. And then this is what I did in Photoshop. So I'm kind of reworking the face a little bit. I did a little bit on white as well, so she's the woman on the left-hand side. So I try to tweak these as much as I can and get them as correct as I can before I blue line print them. And then after I blue line them, I kind of come in and still pencil some of the details in and the rendering, light sources and rendering. So you can see also digitally I'm playing with possibly another robot face. So what I like, black and white, they're basically robot fighters. So I try to combine black and white, with robots, and then with Vampirilla because she's skulls and vampire stuff. So the robots kind of look like skulls. So and Vampirilla's like around the skull. The skull is laying. Let me blow it up a little bit. The skull is in a puddle of, I guess, robot blood, and I think it's probably going to be similar to real blood. I want to make it green. I kind of want to do a Frank Frazetta where he'd always do these splashes of color, and so what I want to do is I want to do red, like it'd be dominantly red down on the bottom of the robot here, like it's laying in a pool of blood, but that there's some green that's coming from the skull as well, and that maybe there's a little pool of green around the base of the skull that's merging with the red blood. So that's it, and you can see I'm playing with adding another skull in the background. And this morning before I went on, there's actually another version of this. Do I have the camera? Where's the other version? Oh, it's not in any good shape right now. But there's a skull over here that Whitney's on. So instead of this little rock ledge that she's on here, some of it's still in pencil, like by her leg, she's going to be on like a full-on profile of a skull coming this way. And the skull, you're going to see some of the chest and shoulder. So you'll see a little bit more of the robot. And I did the robot designs on another sheet, but they have these fangs, you guys. So they have these skull teeth, but they also have these like vampire fangs. So you can kind of see it on this one that's on the right-hand side that I digitally drew in. But I wish I could fit them more in so you could see the fangs. Somehow maybe I'll try to rework it a little bit so I can get the fangs in, because it was actually pretty cool. So yeah, so this is what I've been working on. So that's Reed Blackett, the guy standing, aka Black. To his left is Whitney Sung, aka White, with her staff. He's got his gun. And then we have the famous, infamous Vampirilla in the foreground, sitting all loud and proud, little sexy there, on a skull, a robot skull. So that's it, you guys. Let me go back so I can close out here. Go to OBS. I'm going to do a headshot here. Look at that. Look at that caricature. And so then I'm going to go back to the chat, see where you guys are at, see if we got any new people. Yeah, so I hope you guys like it. Oh, Aaron Alfecci, thank you so much. Man, that guy rocks. Your work is so darn good. Yowza Comics, Yao should add music. CDs to your comic art. You know what? Oh my gosh, you guys! I'm gonna write this down. I actually did a YouTube show where I think it's a Kiss Corner, where I put some of my music. Somebody posted on one of these music sites. They posted one of the bands I played in, and they posted it up, and it's there. So maybe I'll try to, I'll find that and I'll bring that into one of these chats. So you'll get to hear me in my metal days. So I think that's a metal band. That's not TKO. That's another band I played in. So this is probably later in the 80s when metal ruled the Sunset Strip. Kind of hair metal, but I hung out more with like the Metallica types and what were they called at the time? They were called Dante Fox, which later became White. Not White Snake, Great White. They became Great White and then burned a club down and killed a bunch of people. But yeah, I hung out with all those guys. It was pretty cool. So congrats. I think that's on the cover. Nice. There's 2 covers, so I hope you guys liked both of them. Crossover with Magnus Robot Fighter. Oh man, that'd be cool. Eric S. And should have an oil slick look. Yeah. Where maybe like the robot blood doesn't match or merge with the real blood or something. Yeah, like an oil blood, like a water and oil kind of where they don't mix together. That's a good idea. Yowza Comics, LOL, add music to the show. I don't know. I'm not that. I'm just learning how to send out invites because I should tease that too. I have a huge special guest that is going to hang at Hack Shack Studios next week. So it'll probably be Tuesday of next week and Sunday. I believe I'm going to have the Render Contender in, and we are going to talk Chrono Mechanics at that time. So I'll probably have some previews, and he's done some artwork that I'll probably show as well. So that should be cool. I think that's going to be Sunday morning, and I believe that the Tuesday special guest, which I'll announce later, will be Tuesday morning as well, at least morning by California standards, Cal time. So thanks guys. I am going to put an end to this stream. You guys have a great day, and keep supporting these books, you guys. We would not be here without you. So it's been great hanging out with you, and I hope you guys are looking forward to Chrono Mechanics as much as I am. And in the description, I gotta learn how to promote better. In the description, I have a pre-launch page for Chrono Mechanics. So if you guys like extras, if you guys like exclusive content, and who doesn't, go there, sign up to the pre-launch Chrono Mechanics page, and you'll be eligible for those one-of-a-kind exclusives that only the people that sign up are going to have access to. So I have some ideas, you guys, and I've been talking to some people, some other creative people that have been working on Chrono Mechanics as far as film people and novel people about possibly doing some kind of exclusives that are related to those disciplines. So that'll be cool. So Yowza says, peace, everyone. Yes, peace. Thanks for the stream. You're welcome. A great show. Thank you, Yowza Comics. And thank you guys again. And go check out some Chrono Mechanics. Oh, and I will be posting some updates on that that pre-launch page. I realize that the artwork that's up there is probably not wowing you guys. It was just holding place artwork until I could get more work that will actually be in this campaign. So don't be put off by that. It's only going to go up and get bigger and better from there. So thanks guys. Talk to you later.